Welcome everyone to our episode 51 of the podcast Cultivating a New Generation. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the biochemistry of love. And we are going to go deep into the science of love and not as the marketing concept that we know or as the just romantic love that we also know a lot. Now, for discussing this topic, I based the information on the article Carter, 2013, The Biochemistry of Love and Oxytocin Hypothesis, and it is from the EMBO Reports, volume 14, number 1, pages 12 to 16. That's the reference for this kind of talk that we are going to have and to go beyond the concept of romantic love. The study of love in this context offers insight into many important topics, including the biological basis of interpersonal relationships and why and how disruptions in social bonds have such pervasive consequences for behavior and physiology. Life on Earth is fundamentally social, and we have seen that nowadays that we just are recovering our freedom to get out and to start our social lives again. The ability to interact dynamically with other living organisms to support mutual homeostasis, growth, and reproduction evolved early. Social interactions are present in primitive invertebrates and even among prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are bacteria or protozoa, and they recognize and approach members of their own species. And look at this, I'm talking about a very primitive species of sentient being that is also looking for these social interactions. Bacteria also reproduce more successfully in the presence of their own kind and are able to form communities with physical and chemical characteristics that go far beyond the capabilities of the individual cell. Insect species have evolved particularly complex social systems known as eusociality. These insects and the eusociality is characterized by a division of labor. Eusociality seems to have evolved independently at least 11 times. So the course of the evolution of these kind of social communities and supportive systems has been in primitive stages of our evolvement. That give us a lot of information on why do we need so much the social pillars of our life. Research in honeybees indicates that a complex set of genes and their interactions regulate eusociality, and that this resulted from an accelerated form of evolution. So as we evolve, we should be more social and we should be more supportive of each other, just as these primitive species are trying to mirror those kind of supportive systems to us. And we are supposed to be an evolved species. So what's happening here? Why are not able to really understand that the most important quality of our lives and the most important nurturing environment for love is a supportive community, not a restrictive community, not measures that many times seem pretty incongruent. So let's just reflect on that and why is so important to have these social communities. In other words, the molecular mechanisms that favor high levels of sociality seems to be on an evolutionary fast track. The evolutionary pathways that led from reptiles to mammals allowed to emerge the unique anatomical systems and biochemical mechanisms that enable social engagement, and selectively reciprocal ability and sociability. Many mammals show intense parental investment in the offspring and form lasting bonds with their offspring. Several mammalian species, including humans, wolves, and prairie voles, also develop long-lasting, reciprocal, and selective relationships between adults, with several features of what humans experience as love. In turn, these reciprocal interactions trigger dynamic feedback mechanisms that foster growth and health. So we need these kind of communities not only to have acceptance, not only for our mental health, but also to grow, to have an homeostatic environment inside of us, and to signal our system with epigenetic marks that we are going to go further in the explanation. The biology of love originates in the primitive parts of the brain, the emotional core of the human nervous system that evolved long before the cerebral cortex. The brain of a human in love is flooded with sensation, often transmitted by the vagus nerve. As we spoke about the vagus nerve, it goes in many parts of our body and interacts with our metabolism, with the digestion, and with the immunity. So we need these interactions also to self-regulate many of the functions that are inside of us. The brain of humans, when we are in love, creates much of what we experience as the emotions. The modern cortex struggles to interpret the primal messages of love and waves a narrative around incoming visceral experiences, potentially reacting to that narrative rather than reality. So what does this mean? It means that everything that is happening inside of you in terms of the signals, in terms of the metabolic symptoms that you can have, they are trying to upregulate many of the functions that you have when you are in love. That's why we create a homeostatic state. And I'm not talking about just romantic love. This kind of love is the one that you can have for yourself, for members of your community, for friends, for anyone. So creating an environment based on love is going to upregulate and give you much more biochemical information that is going to be expressed in being at peace, stable, and more cognitive, able to understand what is happening rather than the reality that the external things are creating for you. So it is much important your internal systems than the outside world. One element that repeatedly features in the biochemistry of love is the neuropeptide oxytocin. We spoke about that, and I made a lot of posts and a blog article about this. Oxytocin is the most important molecule of love, is the signature of love. In large mammals, oxytocin adopts a central role in reproduction by helping to expel the big brain baby from the uterus, ejecting milk and sealing a selective and lasting bond between mother and offspring. This is the magical substance that makes you alive, that gives you the life force between the world that you were coming from and this one. So it is the most important link also that you are going to create with your mom. Mammalian offspring crucially depend on their mother's milk for some time after birth. And we have also listened a lot of science about the nutrients that are embedded in the milk of mothers. So that's why it's very important, the lactation stage, that it goes beyond or almost up to 2 years. All of those substances that contain hormones, that contain neuropeptides, that contain also immune messengers are going to protect the baby to have a much better resilience in terms of facing any kind of illness. Human mothers also form a strong and lasting bond with their newborns immediately after birth, in a time period that is essential for nourishment and survival of the baby. However, women who give birth by cesarean section without going through labor or who opt not to breastfeed still form a strong emotional bond in their children. So it is not just by natural labor, it is also by cesarean section. So it is giving us the science now of how this molecule cross barriers in terms of the impact that is going to have in ourselves. Furthermore, fathers, grandparents, and adoptive parents also form lifelong attachment to children. Preliminary evidence suggests that simply the presence of an infant releases oxytocin in adults. That's why when we are in the presence of the baby, we virtually are forced to love it, because the smell, the pheromones, the oxytocin, the amazing vibrational energy that they have starts to spread in the room and give us the coherence that many times we need, the peace that we need. Emotional bonds can also form during periods of extreme duress, especially when the survival of one individual depends on the presence and support of another. There is also evidence that oxytocin is released in response to acutely stressful experiences, possibly serving as hormonal insurance. So it protects us. It goes against overwhelming stress. Oxytocin might help to assure that parents and others will engage with and care for infants, to stabilize loving relationships, and to ensure that in times of need, we will seek and receive support from others. Of course, oxytocin is not the molecular equivalent of love. It is just one important component of a complex neurochemical system that allows the body to adapt to highly emotive situations. The systems necessary for reciprocal social interactions involve extensive neural networks through the brain and the autonomic nervous system that are dynamic and constantly changing during the lifespan of an individual. We also know that the properties of oxytocin are not predetermined or fixed. Oxytocin's cellular receptors are regulated by other hormones and epigenetic factors. These receptors change and adapt on the basis of life experiences. Both oxytocin and the experience of love change over time. In spite of the limitations, new knowledge of the properties of oxytocin has proven useful in explaining several enigmatic features of love. To dissect the anatomy and the chemistry of love, scientists needed a biological equivalent of the Rosetta Stone. Just as the actual stone helped linguistics to decipher an archaic language by comparison to a known one, animal models are helping biologists draw parallel worlds between ancient physiology and contemporary behaviors. Research indicates that, as in humans, both are particular mouse or mice breed, that they are characterized by those nurturing experiences. So it is the most rich research experience in terms of the hormones that we are going to observe. In those two species, voles and humans, oxytocin has a major role in social interactions and parental behavior. Of course, oxytocin does not act alone. It has its allies. Its release and actions depend on many other neurochemicals, including endogenous opioids and dopamine. So what we are seeing here, we are seeing that oxytocin recruits a lot of these neuropeptides that are going to construct neural pathway or neural structure that is going to support many of the systems that are going to help us to think clearly, to open our prefrontal cortex, and to create much more coherence in terms of the metabolic functions. Particularly important to social bonding and are the interactions between oxytocin and a related peptide, vasopressin. That's the most important ally. The systems regulated by oxytocin and vasopressin are sometimes redundant. They can have several functions that are similar. Both peptides are implicated in behaviors that require social engagement by either males or females, such as huddling over an infant. If we accept selective social bonds, parenting, and mate protections as proxies for love in humans, research in animals supports the hypothesis that oxytocin and vasopressin interact to allow the dynamic behavioral states and behaviors necessary for love. So these two hormones are going to work together in order to create replicated enhanced effect in our whole system. Oxytocin and vasopressin have shared functions, but they are not identical in their actions. The genes that regulate the production of oxytocin and vasopressin are located on the same chromosome. Is that a coincidence? No. Possibly allowing a coordinated synthesis or release of these peptides. So that's where science cannot explain this kind of phenomena. How these two important hormones are located in the same chromosome, or why are they located in the same chromosome? That's where spirituality enters the stage. This was created by a higher power, and this has a reason. And all of these things are just going to give you that power if you start understanding that all the tools, all the features, all the traits are inside of you, or the healing prescription is inside of you. Both peptides, vasopressin and oxytocin, can bind to and have antagonistic and agonistic effects on each other's receptors. Is that a coincidence again? I don't think so. They work in balance, they work together, they work as a team. That's another signal that we should be able to pick up as social beings, as humans. We are supposed to work together. We are supposed to have a community. We are supposed to support each other, not fight, not divide, not isolate. I hope that you're picking up these messages because all of them are inside of you, whether you like it or not, they are inside of you. Vasopressin is associated with physical and emotional mobilization and supports vigilance and behaviors needed for guarding a partner or territory, as well as other forms of adaptive self-defense. Vasopressin might also protect against shutting down physiologically in the face of danger. In many mammalian species, mothers behave agonistically in defense of their young, possibly through the interactive actions of vasopressin and oxytocin. Before mating, prayer balls are generally social, even towards strangers. However, within approximately 1 day of mating, they begin to show high levels of aggression towards intruders, possibly serving to protect or guard a mate, family, or territory, because they know that they are going to give birth to a new member that is not going to be able to defend by him or herself. This mating-induced aggression is especially obvious in males. By contrast, oxytocin is associated with immobility without fear. Again, immobility without fear. So you are in a vigilance state, but you are not controlled by fear. You are thinking what you are doing. This includes relaxed physiological states, again, relaxed, not stressed, and postures that allow birth, lactation, and consensual sexual behavior. Studies of rodents and lactating women suggest that oxytocin has the capacity to modulate the behavioral and autonomic distress that typically follows the separation from a mother, child, or partner, reducing defensive behaviors and thereby supporting growth and health. So this hormone is so important that it modulates your autonomic, your behavior, your emotional skills in order to sense danger, in order to sense fear, in order to sense stress, in order to regulate your emotions. And it is activated by social communities, social support, social reflection, social mirroring, all of the affectionate, compassionate actions that we can have with ourselves are the ones that are going to prime this system in order to grow. So what is the solution to many of the conflicts that we are seeing nowadays? Love. Love will be the answer, but we seem to be stubborn and we seem to be distracted. So the moment you become more aware of yourself, that's the moment that you are going to connect the genes, you are going to upregulate the signals, and you are going to produce this dynamic duo inside of you. During early life, in particular, trauma or neglect might produce behaviors and emotional states in humans that are socially pathological. Again, during early life, in particular, trauma or neglect might produce behavior and emotional states in humans that are socially pathological. So the more we create conflict, the more we are going to downregulate these kind of genes, and the less we are going to produce these kind of magical substances. As the processes involved in creating social behaviors and social emotions are delicately balanced, they might be triggered in inappropriate context, leading to aggression towards friends or family. Alternatively, bonds might be formed with prospective partners who fail to provide social support or protection. So the more we have conflict in our childhood stages, the more we can be prone to have altered or disrupted social interactions and fail to provide social support or protection. That's what we are seeing in many of the relationships failing and many of the conflicts between couples. The moment you are trying to fight with another human being, that's the moment you are relying on these kind of past conflicts, and you are going into the ruminative loop, and you are priming the genes of fear. You are priming the molecules of stress, and you are creating more chaos, and you are creating replicative phenomena in other people. And that's what we have seen during this kind of time, that we pause, and many people that become that or that became more aware, they have open eyes now to see what is the side effect of many of the measures that we suffer globally. Infants of traumatized or highly stressed parents might be chronically exposed to vasopressin, either through their own increased production of the peptide or through higher levels of vasopressin in maternal milk. So this paragraph and this type of research that we are digesting now tell us why the emotions of parents are going to be transmitted and mirrored to their children, and they are going to absorb it. Even if you try to fake that nothing is wrong, internally, your chaotic state is signaling them with the wrong kind of molecules to produce defensiveness, social disruption, and many conflicts that he or she will face in the future. Such increased exposure could sensitize the infant to defensive behaviors or create a lifelong tendency to overreact to threats. That's why many people that are hurt in their childhood, they replicate that in their future relationships because they haven't healed. And the more you shut down to speak, to have a dialogue with your partner, the more you are creating the same loop. The more you open your heart and you see that you are playing as a team and not competing with each other, that's the moment that you will create coherence in your relationship. On the basis of this kind of research, for example, in rats, it seems that in response to adverse early experiences or chronic isolation, pay attention, chronic isolation. What happened the last 2 years globally? Chronic isolation. The genes for vasopressin receptors can become upregulated, leading to an increased sensitivity to acute stressors. What are we seeing globally? Chaos, war, a lot of conflict, a lot of division, a lot of judgmental people, and many sensitive topics. That's what is happening because of the chronic isolation. That's one of the major disruptors that we are going to experience. Still, we are going to heal, but we have to heal through love. We can heal much faster and much better if we start seeing the other person in spite of race, ethnicity, gender, anything created by society to divide. In spite of all those things, the bond that we have with each other, we are bonded. We are bonded by energy. We are bonded by biochemistry. We are bonded by all of the experience that we have inside of us, in spite of the apparent frontiers or borders that society has encouraged. So that's the most important message that I wanted to convey through this topic. We have the power to heal as human beings, and then as individuals, as couples, as community, as friends, as people that are connecting with each other. And we are the ones that are going to regulate that sensitivity to those acute stressors, the anxiety, and all of those things that we are seeing spiking right now. are going to be healed the moment that we understand that love inside of us is more powerful than any of the measures that the external world can create. Thank you for paying attention. If you resonate with the topic, if you like it, please help me to share more awareness about the amazing power tools that we have inside of us to heal us and to heal the world. Thank you, and we will see each other on our next episode. Have an amazing day. Bye.